You're listening to the Act As If podcast with Coach Roel. Real life success stories in business and investing as they happen. And now, here's your host, Coach Roel.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Coach Roel here with another season of the Act As If podcast. Welcome to season 2. I like to organize this podcast as if it were an 80s sitcom, in the sense that each season is split up into 13 episodes. So this is the first episode of season 2, which means I have 12 more episodes in this season, 6 amazing guests. And the guests that I have lined up for you this season are quite interesting. A lot of them are real estate investors. A lot of them are Canadians looking to invest in Florida. They're all very real, very successful. And the interesting thing is they each are having their own success stories unfolding for us to see as we speak as well. So I welcome you to this. And I wanted to share a story with you, as I plan to do at the beginning of each season, like I did with the beginning of season 1. And this season is to give you an example of what I mean by act as if, and how it has served me personally in my recent past. Recent past, maybe not so recent anymore, because the older that I get, I think it's a recent, but it turns out that it's, in terms of actual number of years, it's not so recent. So actually going back to around, I think the year was around 2000 or 2001, maybe it was 1999. My goodness, my memory is starting to fail me. At any rate, some of you who've known me for many years know that I, once upon a time, with a bunch of friends of mine, we had launched a Filipino-Canadian magazine. And I want to share that story with you. I have never shared this publicly to my best recollection. Definitely have not recorded it for all of the world to be able to hear. But the story goes, it was an urban Filipino cool magazine, and we initially called it Brown Sugar. And there's an act as if component to this, to forewarn you. It's going to be a bit of a longer story, so get comfortable if you're working out, or if you're having a drink at the end of the day and listening to this, or sitting there in traffic listening to this as you're driving. This is a good time for you to kind of get settled in, and Papa Coach Roel is going to tell a story. So I digress. The magazine name was called Brown Sugar at the time. And our website, if I remember, was interlog.com/bsugar. Now, this is the early days of the internet, where we didn't really understand or fully appreciate the importance of having the .com. So our website was just, what it was. It was our internet provider at the time, with an attachment, a tail on it being bsugar. Anyways, just as a fine side note, when we were trying to launch this, so picture this, I'm in just finished university. Actually didn't even finish university, I didn't graduate, but I was done with university, put it that way. And a couple of my friends, we had gotten together and said, we should launch a Filipino magazine. That would be a cool idea. You see, I used to be the president of the Filipino-Canadian Association of Ryerson once upon a time in the mid-90s. And when we were all done with school, most of my friends had graduated. Again, I said I did not. And we still wanted to do something for the community there. And so one of us had this cool idea and said, we should launch a magazine. We're like, yeah, that's cool. Let's do that. Let's launch a Filipino-Canadian magazine. So we struggled really hard trying to figure out, how are we going to find the money to launch this magazine? We had no idea. None of us has ever done this before. And so we would have all these fun meetings talking about stuff and getting off topic, until finally one of our friends who was visiting, who wasn't necessarily part of the core in the beginning, but he said, well, what can you guys do? Because our complaints were, we have no money, we don't know how to launch. We tried to solicit for advertisers. they say, well, sure, I'm open to it. Let's take a meeting. Where's your magazine? Oh, well, we don't have a magazine because that's why we need your advertising. I was like, well, I'm not going to advertise with you until you have a magazine. So it was like a chicken and egg sort of thing. So at that point, one of our friends said, well, if you can't publish a magazine because you don't have money just yet, what can you do? And that was a really profound question, because then it got our creative juices flowing. And so we thought, yeah, well, what can we do? And one of us jokingly said, well, we can throw parties, we can throw jams. That's what we used to call it in the 90s, right? Well, you know how to throw a jam. Okay, so let's throw a jam. Let's throw a launch party for the magazine. But we don't have a oh, wait a minute. And I knew where he was going with this. So I said, let's throw a launch party, because we know we can make money. We'll charge at the door. And this is in downtown Toronto, right? In like probably 1999, I think, 1998 maybe. And we could cover charge at the door. So we'll make money there. And then we can also charge for coat check, because it's cold in Toronto. When people go out, they need to have a coat check. So we could make money off of those two things. And then we'll ask the community, our friends and stuff, to volunteer their time. We know the hottest DJ at the time was the brother of one of our friends, one of the core people who launched this magazine. And he would do it for like next to nothing, if not for free. And so we're like, okay, yeah, that's a great idea. Let's do a magazine launch party. Then we'll make the money, and then we'll go out to the printer and we'll be able to print. So we had all the files ready to go, the articles, the pictures. It was ready to go. It existed on a computer disk, and we just didn't have the money to actually go and publish it. So we're like, okay, let's throw a jam. We can know how to do that. However, we couldn't throw it at Ryerson because we were no longer students. So we needed a venue. And that's where we really put our heads together. And we said, okay, well, let's approach one of the bars downtown that doesn't have a regular Friday night. Because all the Saturday nights were always booked with regular parties at the time. This is before all the condos went up in downtown Toronto. If you're anywhere plus or minus my age, which is 25 years old, no, kidding. I'm 48 years old as I'm recording this. But if you're anywhere plus or minus my age group, Gen X, Gen Y, that sort of thing, then you may remember that Toronto, once upon a time, had a clubbing district or a nightclub district. And so we approached one of the bars downtown, which we knew was always dark on a Friday night, never had a lineup, never had any cover charge. And so we approached the owner and we told him what our plan was, but we wanted to launch this magazine. So we basically were acting as if this was a foregone conclusion that this is going to be a success. And we just needed to have a venue for a launch party, because this is going to be the next biggest thing in Toronto, right? Filipino-Canadian urban cool magazine, Brown Sugar. And so he was asking, well, how do I know you're going to be able to bring this crowd? So we had an initial meeting and we talked about it. We fumbled through it. We didn't know what we were doing. We said, okay, let's go away. We'll come back with a proposal. So we put our heads together and we said, okay, after that, we took that meeting with that bar owner. We said to ourselves, amongst our group of friends, we said, okay, well, what we can do is we know we can throw a party. We know we can bring the people. So we had a little bit of money to pay for club flyers. That's basically it. And then this is before, having websites. It was before Eventbrite. It was long before Facebook. And we still communicated with each other like by phone and by text message. And so we went back to the bar owner and we said, how about this? You let us use your venue for free, and you keep all of the alcohol sales at the bar. Allow us to charge a cover charge at the door and allow us to charge coat check, and let us keep all of that revenue. You get everything at the bar. And he said, okay, sounds like I'm open to that idea. How much in bar sales would you bring in? I forget the exact numbers, but I then threw it back to him and said, well, how much do you usually make on a Friday night? I remember doubting the number that he gave me as being legitimate, because he basically had nobody happening in his bar on a Friday night. So we said, okay, sure. we'll beat your regular bar sales on that night. But then he also wanted to bring his regular patrons as well. So he knew his regular patrons by face. Fine, we can have a guest list for your guys. That's pretty normal for clubbing, for a club district, is to have the owner have their own personal guest list. So we're good. And so we shook hands. We said, okay, you got the venue for free and you can run your launch party, have at it. We signed a contract. I don't even know if it was a very good contract, but we signed something. And we said, good, we're high-fiving each other. Great, we're gonna have this launch party. Now, remember, at this time, there was no magazine. There's nobody who's committed to coming to the party. There's no RSVP or anything like that, any kind of that technology. But we printed off our flyers and we acted as if this was really going to happen. And so we contacted an Asian modeling agency to be spokesmodels. I think we had some of the parents of some of my friends contribute food. We asked a restaurant to contribute some finger foods. This was going to be a classy event. It's not just show up to the club and then drink some alcohol and then party and then that's it. We went all out. We scheduled, like I said, this modeling agency. We had food catered. We had lined up the hottest DJ at the time, who happened, again, as I mentioned, to be the brother of one of our friends and a good friend of ours as well. And we printed up the club flyers as if this is really, really going to happen. Not only that, but we also knew that there were some Filipino performance groups, like singing groups, like boy band kind of thing, girl bands. And we invited performers to come in as well. Oh, and we had a dance troupe. There was like a bunch of Filipino Latin dancers that also did a performance as well. So we lined them all up. None of them needed to get paid. They were just happy to have an audience to be able to perform in front of. And the cool thing is we were in the working world at that time. So one of my partners was actually working at a media company. He had actually graduated from radio and television arts in Ryerson. And so the first job that he had out of university was at a production company that did Anne of Green Gables, if you guys remember that miniseries. And through that company, he had access to a huge media public relations Bible that had a whole bunch of magazines, radio stations, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's years later, so I think it's pretty safe to be able to reveal this secret of what happened back then. But basically what he did was, when no one was looking, he sent out a press release saying that this first of its kind Filipino-Canadian urban magazine is going to be launched on such and such a date, and that everyone needs to show up. So we sent out that press release, and in the weeks leading up to the actual launch party, little by little, Now Magazine confirmed their attendance. iMagazine confirmed their attendance. CBC confirmed their attendance. CP24 confirmed their attendance. We're like, holy smokes, these guys actually believe we're going to do this. And here we are, a bunch of just fresh out of college or university kids pretending like we're going to launch this party. But we went with it anyways. And so we're like, holy smokes, this is getting to be real, guys. Like, this is the power of Act As If. People start to trickle in. Even before that, prior to that, actually, the spokesmodels show up. We had brown sugar t-shirts and baby tees printed up, silk screened. I had worked at a silk screening company at that time, so I was able to get a nice discount off of that. And we pulled all of our resources on a shoestring budget, and we put out this vision as if it was actually going to happen. And so here comes opening night. We're set up, we've got the food on banana leaves. We've got the beautiful spokesmodels, tall Asians, like over 5'6". It was amazing. I didn't know that they existed. And so they showed up with their branded t-shirts. We had huge posters printed up of the cover of the magazine to show that here's what the Brown Sugar magazine is going to look like. And we had one of the hot Filipino boy bands at the time in the city on the cover. We had featured them. We had a friend who was a photography student, an amateur photography student, take their photo and put that on the cover as well. So when you step into the venue, you see the posters on the wall, you see the banana leaves with the Filipino food, finger foods on there, the lumpia and the dried mango, and you see the spokesmodels and you hear the music playing. Before anyone walked into that venue, you're like, this looks like it's gonna be a pretty cool party. It just had no people there. And so it was a cold, I don't even remember what it was, but it was like in the winter, I think, at some point. And so we open up the doors and people are not showing up. One or two people kind of trickle in. We didn't want to hold up the line, as one of those tricks that a lot of these nightclubs do is they hold up the line so it looks like it's really busy. We just wanted people to get inside and get their money. Like, get them to pay cover, get them to let them pay for coat check and take their money and let them into the venue already. So we had people come in, and it started really slow at first. And if you know anything about Filipinos, they're notoriously late. And I know a lot of cultures have this. In the Filipino culture, we called it Filipino time. So if you say start time is 10 o'clock, they show up at like 11, 11:30, maybe midnight. So we open up the doors at like 10 o'clock, no one's showing up. 10:30, still very few people. 11 o'clock, we're starting to get worried now. 11:30, a crowd starts to form. People really start to pile in. And media, more importantly than that, media started showing up at around 11 o'clock, and we're like trying to entertain them, trying to be like, oh, how do you like this? Whatever, welcome. Who are the principals? And you know what media kept asking? Where's the magazine? So listen closely to this. This is the cool part. We said, oh, the magazine is not here. The magazine is going to be at such and such locations, which we had set up around the city. Now, at the time, at Yonge and Queen Street in downtown Toronto, part of the Eden Center, there was a record store called Tower Records. Some of you may remember this. And in the basement of Tower Records, they had the magazine section, the periodical section. And in a tiny corner of the periodical section, tucked away in the basement of Tower Records at Yonge and Queen, was the zine section. Apostrophe Z-I-N-E, short for magazine. So it was a zine. And what a zine was, it was kind of like the size of this, right? Half size, like a Reader's Digest type of thing. Not nearly as nicely printed as that example, but is usually photocopies of somebody hand scribbling something and then stapling it and folding it, and they would put it up for sale. So what we knew was that you could put up any of your zines for free on consignment, and they wouldn't have any application process. It's just bring a bunch of them, and then we'll put a price tag on it, and you'll put it on the shelves, and if they sell, Tower Records would keep account of it. You show up a few days later and they give you 50% of the sales. Now these zines at the time, they're picture 1998, would sell for like $1, maybe $2 at the most. So it's not a lot big moneymaker. It was really a grassroots thing for maybe comic book artists to use, or just people who want to talk political. So that's what the zine section was in the corner of the periodical section in the basement of Tower Records at the time. So I knew that we could put our magazines up for consignment. And so that's where I targeted. I told the media that that's where the magazine, Brown Sugar Magazine, is going to be available on Monday morning, because we wanted to show those venues that there really was a demand for this urban Filipino cool magazine out there. And we had another location up Yonge Street, which was between Dundas and College. There was a little head shop there that agreed to put our magazines on their shelf as well for the same consignment agreement, 50% of whatever we sold. And so that's what we told the media, and that's what we told all of the attendees. Little did they know that the reason why we did that is because we didn't have money to print the magazine. Our plan was, once again, make money at the door at CoCheck, take that money, run to the printing company, put the deposit down, pay for the printing, and then pick up the printed magazines and then run to the venues to get them on the shelves. And then hopefully people would actually go to those venues to purchase the magazines. So that's the story, and we were sticking to it. The media people said, oh, that's genius. So that's why you don't have the magazine here. Meanwhile, we're like kind of laughing to ourselves under our breath, thinking, oh my gosh, they bought it. So that went over really well. Everyone was enjoying themselves. We had a dress code. We made sure that everyone looked really good for the media when the cameras and the photographers showed up and the journalists, which we didn't know they were going to show up, but they actually did end up showing up. And at one point in the night, the really cool thing is that CP24 decided to show up, and they usually at that time would broadcast live from somewhere in the downtown Toronto area. So they decided that, I guess it was a slow news night, they decided to show up at our party and broadcast live from the launching of Brown Sugar magazine, the first of its kind Filipino-Canadian magazine. And so CP24, their truck rolled up at around midnight, and at the perfect timing, because at around midnight as well is when we had scheduled for one of the Filipino performance groups, the singing groups, to perform for everyone. So it was a lot of juggling and making sure that, hey, don't start the performance until CP24 is ready to start broadcasting. So we're like going back and forth. CP24, are you ready to go? Hey guys, are you ready to sing? CP24, you ready to go? Okay, ready? Okay, good. So let's start the show now, because CP24 is going to start broadcasting in about 10-15 minutes. So we need to get the show on the road. So they started performing. Then a few minutes into it, everyone's going crazy. Everyone's loving it. CP24 turns on their bright lights, and we see them broadcasting. Picture the correspondent standing there. Behind them, we got a performance going on. Got the bright lights of the camera in front. And I couldn't tell what they were saying, but I saw the recording afterwards, and they were broadcasting live. We're like, oh my God, this is actually happening. We're high-fiving each other in the background, be like, we're getting broadcast live on CP24. This is amazing. And so that all happened. They broadcast for probably about 15-20 minutes while they went to cut away to other news items for the night. Then they left. The next week, we had a full page spread with pictures and everything of me. If you look in the archives for Now Magazine, you could probably still find it to these days. So you could see me, my friends, a bunch of people. We're all dressed to the nines, full 2-page spread, all these pictures. Brown Sugar magazine, Filipino-Canadian magazine gets launched. We're like so amazed. Magazine had a full page spread as well. We had some magazine articles or some newspaper articles set up. CBC had a short coverage on that. And then we had the recording of CP24 as well, playing on the internet, the early days of the internet at that time. So I then had to decompress over that weekend. Monday, Tuesday went by. I go and bring the files to the printing house. And I was a little bit late because I was like, wow, I was really burnt out from that whole experience. Got the things printed by Thursday. Then I called up Tower Records because I was living downtown at the time. And I said, hey, is it okay? Is there going to be somebody there in the zine section to receive my magazines? And the person who answered the phone said, yeah, I'll be here. So just out of curiosity, what's the name of your zine? And I said, it's called Brown Sugar Magazine. And here's the cool part. He said, oh, you're the guy. I was like, what do you mean I'm the guy? He's like, what's the big idea telling everybody in the world that they can find this Brown Sugar magazine of yours on our shelves, and I have no idea what they're talking about? I mean, I was like, what are you talking about? He said, this whole week we've been having like 20, 30 people a day asking for this magazine by name, and I have no idea what they've been talking about. I'm like, come on, 20, 30 people per day? You're exaggerating, right? He's like, okay, well, maybe 20 people per day. But yeah, a lot of people are asking, and I have no idea what they're talking about. So that's what I mean by you're the guy. I'm like, oh, sorry, I had no idea. And I was a kid just out of university, right? So I was like late with my assignment. I didn't submit my assignment. That's basically what it was. I was like, okay, I'll be down there within an hour. So I had this huge box of about 100, 200 magazines. And unfortunately, we kind of missed the boat a little bit because we had no way of letting those people know that now you can come back to Tower Records and buy these magazines. But at any rate, I came down with a whole box full of these zines, brought it in, plunked them down on the guy's desk. He said, how many do you got here? We counted them and all that, signed a little contract, K 50%. We sold it for, I don't know, maybe $2, $3 a piece, and hope for the best. And then I went to the other venue, which was up Yonge Street, north of Yonge and Queen at the time. And it was the same story. The guy's like, we've been having a bunch of people come in here and I have no idea what they're talking about. So finally, give me those magazines and put them on the shelf. So that was the story of how we launched Brown Sugar Magazine. Going back to the very beginning, where did it all start? So the lesson here, kids, is act as if. Where that all started was, hey, a friend of ours came to us and said, hey, wouldn't it be cool if ... That's my favorite conversation starter because that starts the creative process. It's like, here comes a cool idea. Wouldn't it be cool if fill in the blanks? Wouldn't it be cool if we bought an investment property in Florida? Wouldn't it be cool if I went and started a business on the side? Wouldn't it be cool if we launched a Filipino magazine? Wouldn't it be cool if fill in the blanks, right? So that's something I definitely want to share with you. And it's also kind of an origin story of how I came up with this whole act as if thing that I love to preach to people. I mean, isn't it amazing how everything that we do in life first starts off as a thought? And how do you bring it to life? Well, you basically are already doing the act as if process. Maybe you just don't know it. Maybe you're just not doing it intentionally or intentionally enough. How did you get your job? How did you get accepted to the first college or university? How did you graduate? How did you get your first job? How did you get your promotion? It all started with a thought and you're hoping that it's going to happen. And the times when you felt the most confident were those times where you were acting as if. Like as we stand here right now, think to yourself, what is it that you would really love to have as part of your life that isn't a part of your life right now? And if you're so inclined and so inspired or motivated to go towards it, aren't you in some way acting as if? So that story about Brown Sugar Magazine, which later on was turned into Brown Scene Magazine, because a funny thing at the time is the brownsugar.com domain name was taken, and it was actually an adult website for aficionados of females of color. Let's put it that way. So we quickly had to switch our branding away from Brown Sugar because we did not want to be associated with that. So we came up with Brown Scene, and the cool thing was brownscene.com was not taken, so we were able to take it. So that's the origin story of that magazine. So there you have it. There's the origin story once again of Brown Sugar Magazine, which eventually became Brown Scene Magazine, which was very instrumental in my experience of how to use this act as if method to be able to achieve whatever it is that you want in life. And I sincerely hope that you enjoy the interviews that I have here. Once again, the interview format is in 2 parts. Every guest that I have has 2 episodes. The first part of their 2-part interview starts off with me role-playing with my interviewee as if they've already achieved their goals in the near future, about 10 to 12 months into the future. So I play along with them. I say, wow, that's great. Awesome for you. I'm so excited. Tell me more. And then after we finish that first part of their interview, we then go to the second part of their interview where we just speak freely, talking about what they do and how much of the first part of the interview was objectively real at the time and how much of that was aspirational. So it's a really fun exercise, and it's a very practical exercise as well. So with that, I hope you enjoy the interviews coming up. I plan to publish them about once every week. And if you have any questions regarding that, feel free to find me on my various social media outlets. And at some point, maybe you'll actually join me in creating your own act as if story. So once again, Coach Roel here, signing off episode 1 of season 2 of the Act as If podcast.
You've been listening to the Act as If podcast with Coach Roel. Real life success stories in business and investing as they happen.